Welcome to Energy Stew. This is Peter Roth, your host, and I'd like to ask you actually a couple of questions. I want to know do you believe you're living locally or non-locally? And do you believe your life is tangled or entangled? So which of those makes sense to you? And we're going to talk about non-locality and entanglement, but we're really going to talk about how that created the reality we're living in on this beautiful Gaia planet. And so we're going to be talking with the author who's a good friend and has written beautiful books in the past and has been on Energy Stew before, and has a new book out called The Story of Gaia, The Big Breath and the Evolutionary Journey of Our Conscious Planet. Jude Currivan, welcome back to Energy Stew.
Thank you, Peter. It's great to be back with you. It's been a while.
Yes, of course. Unfortunately, because you and I just love connecting with you. It's such a pleasure. And so I want to ask you, I mean, this book is monumental because you are a scientist, an astrophysicist, you're very cosmological and have a great knack for getting into the nitty-gritty of evolution and how Gaia was formed and how we got to here from there. And the book is quite a deep story of each step of the way, each major step of the way, from creating a planet to creating life to creating us and to creating where we are.
Even further back, because, as I say, as you know, Peter, I say at the beginning of the book, our stories don't begin with us. They go back as far as we have memories. So actually, Gaia's story as a planetary mother goes back to the very beginning of our universe. So what I've done is go back to that first moment, that first incredible moment of space and time, the birth of our universe, and show how our universe, and this is evidence-based, as you know from reading the book, this is all evidence-based, that our universe meaningfully exists to purposefully evolve from simplicity to ever greater levels of complexity, and as a, we'll get to this, non-locally unified entity. So Gaia, that started 13.8 billion years ago. Gaia's story only began 4 to 4.5 billion years ago. There's a lot of preparation of our universe and its evolutionary impulse, getting more and more able to eventually birth planetary homes that could in turn birth biological organisms that could actually then evolve from single-celled organisms to, communities of 37 trillion cells called a human being, and the whole ecosystem and the whole Gaian system that we hold in such reverence.
Right, but it's also partnership. Gaia, in its evolution, not everything was created here.
Oh.
There was a lot that came in from seeds of other former planets or ongoing planets and ongoing galaxies that have seeds of life, of different aspects of the life that were needed for Gaia to start forming things here. So it's not like Gaia invented everything. Gaia was
She inherited this incredible abundance of this evolutionary impulse. I mean, I know you're aware of this, but what is so beautiful, I hope our listeners Google some photographs after hearing us share this conversation, because we now have, from the Hubble telescope originally, and now from the James Webb telescope, we have the most glorious images of what are called interstellar molecular clouds. And those clouds are of molecular hydrogen, huge, vast amounts of ice, and all the prebiotic building blocks for
Mm.
biological life. We've discovered them in these wondrous clouds. It's like birthing, they're birthing places for planetary systems.
What
So as you say, when our planetary system came to being, all of those prebiotic building blocks were just ready to have wonderful planetary homes
I
to
love
take
it.
the next step.
Right. What a gift. And it really explains so much that science, without understanding all that, hasn't been able to explain. Because the evolution here really was very meaningful in its own needs, but it, as we said earlier, it didn't all happen just here. But Gaia took advantage of it and birthed this amazing planet because, let's talk about unity, unification, how everything had to work together in
Yes,
magical moments. And I think in the book you talk about how if it wasn't for this exact moment in time, this other thing wouldn't have happened. And, so it's all, but everything is in place. It's all divine order anyway. So you could say, well, and science talks about that. Like other planets can't have life like we do because they didn't have these magical moments that our planet had. And yet, we don't know that these magical moments can happen all over the place through divine
absolutely.
order.
Absolutely. I mean, I think what's really beautiful, and I so loved, I often say I did not write this book. This book wrote me. And I feel that great privilege of this incredible story because just to go back to the first moment of our universe, which Gaia inherited after all those billions of years. In that first moment, 13.8 billion years ago, there was just the very simplest of elements, hydrogen and helium, a little bit of lithium. But the point is, therefore, that all the hydrogen in our bodies, in the waters of Gaia, is as old as the universe, is literally only a few moments younger than our entire universe. But it then took hundreds of millions, billions of years in the centers of stars for that initial hydrogen and helium to alchemize, to this beautiful alchemy into more and more and more complex elements. And then at the end of those stars' lives, when they exploded as supernova, those explosions didn't destroy those elements. They shared them, they spread
Yeah,
them,
I love
they
that.
spread them. And they, after generations of stars, became these interstellar clouds of stardust and molecular hydrogen and ice that then enabled, when planetary homes, just as Gaia has, came into being, to take their next steps in evolutionary
But,
complexity.
but just in the way that Gaia found itself, our universe found itself in, and I don't believe that there was nothing. I think that there were previous universes, and there might be many other universes around us all the
Indeed.
time. But somehow, whatever the primordial elements were were shared by another universe. In other words, our universe didn't invent it all. We were given a gift of it.
I
That
think we were given a gift of, I think what we were given, Peter, was the incredible gift of exquisite fine tuning at the very beginning of our universe. And by fine tuning, I mean the laws of physics, which are innately relational, and they're actually very simple, but they're so relational that their relationship, whether it's E equals mc squared, or on the other key fundamental relationships between energy and matter and space and time, enabled our universe not just to meaningfully exist, but it actually was able to embed an evolutionary impulse from that initial simplicity to ever greater levels of complexity.
right.
So all these 94 natural elements, all of which, by the way, we found within the body of Gaia, which is incredible of itself, the only ones that were there from the beginning were the simplest: hydrogen and helium and a little bit of lithium. But
But
the
I
point,
think they were gifts.
I do too, but they were gifts from the way that our universe emerged from deeper levels of causation.
Right.
Because when we talk about energy and matter and the elements and everything, these are the appearance of our universe. They're not its most fundamental nature. Its most fundamental nature is mindful, is consciousness.
Right. Right. We can't forget that because that's
We
what it's
cannot
all
forget it
about.
because it's the stuff. It is the stuff of reality.
Right. It's information,
Yes,
consciousness, and then we can come back to the hologram that we are the hologram.
we're the pixels.
and
We're the little pixels.
but it's our consciousness uh, that the pixels emerge from.
Well, they don't only emerge from, they are. I mean, as you said, cosmic consciousness, cosmic mind, whatever we may wish to call the infinite and eternal mind of God, Allah, great spirit, great mystery, but the infinite, eternal cosmic mind creates universes as great thoughts.
I love
So
it.
in that sense, mind and consciousness aren't what we have, they're what we in the whole world are. So by doing so with as meaningful information as you say, and expressed through an alphabet of just two letters, ones and zeros, but those two letters pixelate at the most minute scale of our universe, as small as to an atom, as the atom is the whole universe, means that when we come to the size of an atom, there's an enormous amount of meaningful information in every single atom. You then scale up to molecules and onwards and onwards and onwards. The amount of meaningful information embodied in our universe at the very beginning, 13.8 billion years ago, was at its lowest level. Ever since, as space has expanded and time's flowed, more and more and more universal information has been expressed and experienced to the point that we're having this conversation now because we're at the bow wave of space and time with a journey that goes back to the very beginning of our universe.
And I like thinking that we are part of the great thought that created this.
Yes, we're microcosmic co-creators of that great thought.
Right. Yeah. I love
We
feeling
belong
that.
here. We belong here.
Right. And let's look at purpose, uh,
Mm,
because it's very important to understand what you call entropy
mm,
rather than entropy,
yeah.
and how um, that's all about information refining itself. So
Yes.
so I look at our progress, and you talk about it as more and more complex, but the more complex it is, the more it allows us to create refinement.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
And so we
I
can all come back to oneness in
Oh, yes.
third
Always.
dimension. Yeah.
Always, yeah, always. And as you say, I mean, we've moved on beyond the paradigm of entropy, because entropy is so often misunderstood. It's often seen as an increase from order to disorder through time, but it's not. It's actually, entropy is a measure of the energetic states of a system. But we now know that energy and matter aren't the most fundamental. Information's more fundamental. So by moving from this idea of entropy is the energetic states of a system to entropy is the informational content of a system,
Right.
and then move on to our entire universe is all pervaded by meaningful information. We have that entropic increase again from the very beginning of space-time. Every moment as time's flowed forward since then and space has expanded, more and more meaningful information, more and more entropy has been
Right, but it
expressed in
comes
our
from
universe.
entropy because entropy allows it upsets the apple cart and allows new refinement.
No, it doesn't, because the problem with entropy is that we we are living on a planetary home, okay?
Uh-huh.
And a planet is what's called a dissipative system. In other words, it takes energy in, it uses what it needs, and it releases the rest of it, in this case, to space. Okay.
Hmm.
Now, if we're talking about entropy, the old understanding or the old
But
misunderstanding,
maybe that's what I was getting at. It's the old misunderstanding.
absolutely, because the old misunderstanding of entropy being order to disorder says, well, hang on a minute, a planet isn't moving from order to disorder. A planet is surviving and thriving,
Right.
yeah,
But
in
that's
this.
why I was saying that what appears as disorder is only the opportunity for more order.
I love that, and but then we if we get rid of disorder completely,
Good.
and we see this as a journey from simplicity to complexity,
Right.
and we see it therefore that complexity embodies more and more informational content, i.e. entropy, then what's happening is our planetary home continues to evolve. Her entropy continues to increase as the whole universe does,
Mhm.
and we're not in this order disorder state.
It's just that it opens up more space for
It
opportunity.
opens up more potentiality for evolution. Absolutely.
Wonderful. So there's a word in your book that I got a kick out of, and it has to do with how our planet evolved from microorganisms to actually um, needing to work together against a
Yes.
common enemy. And so we're looking at what might people think of as the Garden of Eden that you call the Garden of Eden.
Ediacaran, Ediacaran.
And to me, that's it says that these organisms all of a sudden knew that they had to defend themselves and they had to build community and they there was a fight to grow and to prosper, and that actually inspired the evolution.
Well, it did, because the Ediacaran era was one where there was no predator or prey relationships, as far as we know. And it almost stagnated.
Exactly.
It wasn't moving
That's why
forward.
we needed the Garden of Eden.
Well, yeah, but after that, it was what's called often the Cambrian explosion. After there was a real die-off, there was a real sort of environmental die-off at the end of the Ediacaran, because the organisms that had got that far weren't really going any further. They weren't really evolving in complexity. So there's a real, end of that wave. But then there was an enormous next wave, and that next wave moved into its complexity because of collaboration, where collaboration involved both cooperation and competition.
Right. So
So,
that, but it makes sense that you can see
yeah,
that the Garden of Eden wasn't going anywhere
it's not going anywhere.
until.
And, and then you see teeth and claws and
Right,
all the
exactly.
yeah. But what you got then is that incredible rush to complexity. And every time over the whole story of Gaia from then on, there were pulses of evolutionary emergence. But what you got is when conditions were sort of very stable, there was hardly any evolution.
Right,
When conditions went through the sort of the regular cycles, which we know as the Milankovitch cycles, which are to do with, Gaia's, the ellipticity of Gaia's orbit, the sort of the tilt on her axis, the wobble, those variations caused different environmental conditions.
right,
And within those, there was enough variation to pulse that ongoing evolution, but not in a big way. It was only when there were some real, what we might call catastrophes or calamities or major environmental change, that there was a major die-off. And then the next wave of major, rapid, radical evolution occurred. So that's been what's happening. There's been waves and then falling away. But
right,
every wave has led to greater complexity. And
right.
every wave, to enable that complexity, has required greater levels of multi-level cooperation.
Right. It's just that as humans, we don't have time for all that.
Well, we do. We have learned. We have to cooperate.
Well, I mean, when we think of the limitations of our years, in the life that we're leading. It's hard to imagine the next calamity and and
Well,
how
it's happening, but it's happening now, isn't it? Because our, what I often refer to as our dis-ease of separation has caused us to behave in the ways we have in terms of conflicts, inequalities, injustices, extraction, exploitation, people and Gaia and our planetary home. And surely we've come to the end of that ability to sustain ourselves unless we wake up from the illusion of separation that is the dis-ease that causes those dysfunctional behaviors.
we're in the middle of that. So it's not like we need to be afraid of some coming calamity. We're in it.
We're in it. And we caused it pretty much.
Oh yeah,
We
because
caused it.
we weren't because we hadn't grown enough.
That's right. And I know you don't, and I certainly don't want to blame and shame us. We've come this journey. And like you were saying, in a way, everything is in divine order.
Yeah,
So this journey's brought us to a point where we appreciate our uniqueness. We're each microcosms of that wonderful co-creative venture that we call our universe. But it's time now for us to wake up and remember that that's who we really are. And then we can come together, in love rather than, falling into fear, which of course the mindset, the worldview of separation naturally is a fearful perspective.
sure. It's interesting that ancient societies predicted this time that we're in.
Yeah, they did. And they also, though, predicted the opportunity. And this is where the other prophecies say, there is a time when the tribes will come together or can come together.
Right.
We can, but we still have to choose it, don't we?
That's what it's all for.
Yeah,
It's all for, consciousness evolving
absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
becoming more aware of who we are and what we need
Yes.
and greater love because I've been experimenting a lot with the meaning of consciousness and how it really is a representation of love.
Yes.
And the higher the consciousness, the greater the love. So as we evolve into that, we will choose to be a better society.
Very much so. And it seems to me that, what I write about is the science of love. It's the unity of science. It's the evidence-based science that converges with universal wisdom teachings, at the foundation of all of which is love.
This is why you were chosen to write these books. And your soul came into this life, knowing this journey and all that it would take to prepare for it, because your life has been quite interesting along the way. Even as a child, you had multidimensional experiences,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
you got into corporate marketplace, and but you also studied astrophysics, and it's amazing how it all had to come together beautifully.
It's funny though, isn't it? I often say it was a scenic route, but I was at a place in northern Denmark a few years ago, and there's a cliff walk at a place called Gillele, and it was where the philosopher Søren Kierkegaard used to walk.
Hmm.
And there's a story that he was incredibly depressed. And he was walking along and he used to do this walk and he was very depressed. And one day he looked at the horizon, because from there, there's just, if you look north, there's just sea. Sweden and Norway are over the horizon. And the light was such that he couldn't tell the difference where the sea ended and the sky began. And he suddenly had this knowing of wholeness and of oneness and
Beautiful.
of love. But he also had a great quote, which goes back to my scenic route. He said, "We live life forward and we understand it backwards." So I didn't know. I had no idea. I just followed my nose. And, my life story is a story of curiosities. I think yours probably is.
Yes.
And so, I've come to this point. I look back and go, oh my goodness, yes.
Well, what a blessing you are, and your book is the story of Gaia, which is not your first book, and but you are such a profound writer, and as you say, it writes you.
Which
And
I'm very grateful for.
Yeah, well, that's what it takes, but that's because your mind is not limited to your, to the limited thoughts. You open yourself to higher thoughts coming through, and
Yes, I
it
do.
flows beautifully, doesn't it?
It does, it does. And some of the stories I tell at the beginning of each chapter, some are stories from my travels, some are about attuning and having insights, but all of them, were just a wonderful, joyous part of my journey to this point. So I hope that when people read the book, they can feel those stories. They can feel, because we're all companions on this journey home, it seems to me, of this remembering of who we really are. And when we do that, we can come together and lift up and light up and link up and leap into love together.
Yeah,
That is my hope.
but the word that's coming through to me right now is light. Is that
Light.
yeah,
Yeah.
that you read your book and you just feel the light of it. You feel the light of you feel the light of higher reality of the you know full nature of oneness, and that's the experience of light. I think is a great experience of, and as Kierkegaard saw, it's the way to experience oneness is through the way the light reveals it.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. So this has been so great talking with you. Um, I you're such a gift, and I'm so grateful to have this opportunity. So thank you so much for being on the show and for being a meaningful friend, somebody who really gets it. And I love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you. And I love your journey and the adventures that you continue to have. So we must catch up again soon.
Yes, let's do that. Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
this is Peter Roth, your host of Energy Stew at prn.live. I can be reached at Peter at Heart River. Oh, by the way, where can they contact you?
Well, the easiest and best way, because we have loads of resources on all of this, is at www.wholeworld-view.org. That's whole, W-H-O-L-E, world, W-O-R-L-D, hyphen view, V-I-E-W.org.
So glad I remembered to ask you that. And I'm at peter@heartriver.org. And I'd love to hear from you. And thanks so much for listening.